I don't know how Zach did it, because the last thing I remember about Zach was that he was this pudgy little kid that just skated around with his hands like this, moving back and forth. Pudgy little kid. Nobody ever gave you really any thought that you were going to turn into something. And all of a sudden, he said one day he was at a Verdon Portage game, and boom, there you were. You were 6 foot some tall. You were all thinned out. You had a kind of a chiseled jawline, and he's like, "What happened? When did that switch flip for you, going from the pudgy little kid in Brandon House League to a guy that had a real shot?"
Yeah, it's funny. I have a ton of respect for Pete. He's a very well-known person in Brandon, and a very loved person in Brandon too, being connected to the Wheat Kings and helping a lot of guys through high school hockey, and then being a part of the Crocus Plainsmen too. I always battled with them when I played high school for 1 year there, and no, I think I still am that pudgy little kid. I like ice cream here and there, and kind of go back to those days a little bit. Yeah. No, I think the flip, or the switch kind of flipped when I had gone into my last year of AAA midget. I think Kenny Schneider and Laverne Popple, Tyson Ramsey, and all those guys were coaching then, and we had an incredible group. We had James Shear, former Wheat King captain, Jordy Stallard, the Caspics, Mitch Lyle, Troy Haywood. We had a ton of guys that went on to have good hockey careers, whether it was in university, college, or whether it be senior, or going to just be successful in society, right? And that year, I had thought about quitting hockey, and I had this conversation with my mom, and I was ready to be done. I was ready to go to university or just play another year of high school hockey after, because I had moved to Central Plains to play AAA. I had a year there, and my parents drove me, an hour each way, 4 or 5 times a week, just to get on the ice and play at a high level in Manitoba, right? So they made those sacrifices day in and day out for me to do that. At the end of the day, for me to quit going into that last year just wasn't acceptable. And, whether it was right in my mind or not, it wasn't right for me to not give it a shot due to what the amount of effort that was put in by, my parents and my grandma and my auntie, that went into, driving me, feeding me, doing all those things, hotels and all those sorts of things. And that year I had a good year. I got picked up by Verdon, by the Leslie brothers, and, Crowe knows them. And they gave me a chance in Verdon. And then I kind of, so after AAA, I was about 238 pounds, somewhere along there. I was a big kid. And yeah, I was a big boy.
That's a unit.
Yeah.
Oof. I think Ryan Reeves weighs in at 225, just for the record there. Nice hat,
yeah.
by the way.
Yeah. Thank you. So then that summer I dropped down to 195. I think I put off about 46 pounds in one summer. I was doing CrossFit all summer with James Shear over at Power Play CrossFit on the east side of Brandon. And I was going 6 days a week, and dialed my diet in and tried to kind of slim down, just so I could move on the ice. And I knew if I kept that weight on, I wasn't going to end up playing junior hockey, and that was just cold hard facts. And it wasn't anyone telling me what to do. It was kind of just in my own brain that I wanted to play junior hockey and move on to the next level and just kind of see what I could do, and kind of put my my brain to work a little bit, my body, and just slim down. And then it kind of all started from there, really. And the one big part too is that, like, working out with James Shear kind of helped me a lot too, because he's I think it's an understatement to call that kid a machine. If anyone's, I don't know, Crowe, if you've seen him work out or play hockey, it's incredible. He's 5'10", 5'11", and he can outmuscle any guy on the ice. And whether you attribute that to low center of gravity or him just being an absolute machine, he works out continuously, and the way he trained was the way I needed to train in order to kind of put myself in a position to go on and further my career in junior hockey and further on. And so working out with him really helped me a lot. And then I made it to Verdon, and then had a good first year. And then colleges started, coming around in the second year, and made my way to Bemidji State. And then it was kind of figuring my way out from there.
I'm still looking for that motivation, Zach. I think you left it in Verdon somewhere. I'm trying to find it. I haven't been able to get into the gym and follow the Zach Whitecloud workout plan
quite
as
intensely
intensely as you.
You slimmed down quite a bit since our days in Verdon, though.
Yeah, you know what? I had no choice. I met a lovely little lady there who was, as you know, very into fitness, and I had no choice. I couldn't keep up with her. But Dan, you talked about your path, and it's obviously different for broadcasters. But you're a guy from, I believe, New Jersey, or at least the eastern part of the U.S.
That's
to
right.
now find
Springsteen
yourself.
country. Yep, you got it.
Yeah, exactly. To find yourself in the desert via Syracuse. I mean, when you went to college, was that always your hope, or was this kind of you were going for a business degree and got a shot? How did that all develop?
Well, no, I actually envisioned that they would put an NHL team in Las Vegas, and I knew that that's where I wanted to go. Yeah, no, not at all. I was, let's see, 8 or 9 years old when the Devils lost to the Rangers and Stefan Metso, and that just crushed my childhood. And then the lockout happened, and so the Devils couldn't start playing again until, it was the middle of the winter. It was after Christmas that they started playing. And then they won the Stanley Cup in '95. And as a Devils fan, you hear Mike Emmerich doing the games on Fox in the United States. The championship to New Jersey, the Devils win the Stanley Cup. And then they won it again in 2000 and in 2003. And I was, living in New Jersey. I was in high school when they won their last couple of cups. And I was not going to be an athlete after high school. I was a pretty decent baseball player on a very good high school baseball team. And my dad had played baseball in college. I've got a brother who played football in college. And I had teammates who played Division I sports in the States, but that wasn't going to be for me. You don't see my full height right now, but I've been 5'7" since I was about 10 or 11 years old. Thankfully, as the voice has improved, the height was not going to. So, yeah, I broadcast high school football. In fact, my second high school hockey broadcast, I interviewed Robbie Ftorek, who was then head coach of the Devils and whose son was playing against one of our his son was playing for West Essex High School, and I went to Ridgewood High School. So we interviewed the head coach of the Devils, and we grilled him. How come Brodeur didn't start on back-to-back nights? Well, we were right. They fired Ftorek with 8 games to go in the regular season, despite leading the Eastern Conference. Larry Robinson took over, and the Devils won the Stanley Cup in 2000. I digress. But, sports broadcasting for me, as you could tell, until the producer says time for a break, I just keep on talking. And so Syracuse was a great place for me to kind of pursue that. Broadcasters like Bob Costas and Marv Albert and Marty Glickman and Dick Stockton and Mike Tirico and Sean McDonough, long list of guys who've gone through Syracuse. So I started there, and then Fordham University in New York City, worked for the New Jersey Devils organization in the ECHL. That was great to be part of my hometown team organization. Lou Lamoriello literally signed the paychecks. And then to go back to Syracuse as a professional with the Syracuse Crunch, the American League, the affiliate of the Tampa Bay Lightning, and was there in Syracuse for 5 years. And then the NHL came calling when Bill Foley brought hockey to the desert, as you said. But hockey, I've always loved hockey. I played baseball. I broadcast baseball in the Cape Cod League. That's a great summer league for college players. So there's not a sport or not too many sports that I haven't at least attempted to do the play-by-play for, but I love hockey. And, I've continued doing other sports. Hockey is the number one sport, and they keep giving me hockey jobs, so I just keep on taking it.
What do you think the number one weirdest sport to you that you've been asked to cover is? Because quick side story, a number of years ago, back in my radio days, I was asked to become the voice of the pony chuck wagon races. I did that for 3 years, and I grew into actually loving it. I learned, the drivers, they're great people, but it was a blast. But along your way, was there anything that was out of the box that you didn't think you're going to be covering that you were asked to do?
Yeah, I would say in terms of different sports, I'd say gymnastics was one I was totally unprepared for. Wrestling is a bit strange.
I guess so.
And these are things that you like, how do you do the play-by-play of these things? And the answer is you don't. You just defer to the analyst. That's the way to go. And I think that some other odd, it's not even the sport. It's just the approach to the broadcast. I just came across one of these tapes that I have from high school, and there was a charity roller hockey tournament. And I was it was for in-arena entertainment, we had someone doing kind of the play-by-play over the loudspeaker, but I was doing sort of the color commentary while officiating the game. I was on skates, skating around, kind of calling penalties with a live microphone. And that was again, something that you can't really prepare for. It was a show more than it was a broadcast, but man, there have been a lot of crazy things that we've at least attempted to do. And I think that if we're trying to, make it informative and make it entertaining, that it'll come off reasonably well.
Well, hopefully with the big arena in Vegas, they can attract a big curling event, and Dan can get a shot at Canada's
now,
other
that's
national
one I
sport.
have not done, and I enjoy watching curling, and I'd have to brush up on the finer points and some of the rules, but that is a sport that I have yet to attempt. So that's a good one.
The Continental Cup, it used to go to Vegas for a number of years in a row.
Yeah.
So if it comes back again, that just might be your shot right there.
There you go. I've got to look out for that. Absolutely.
So speaking of the building in Vegas, I mean, from the broadcaster's perspective and Zach from the player's perspective, it already has a legendary reputation. Yes, hi. That's just my kid in the background.
The leader of our fan club.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about him. So the building has already been legendary in terms of the atmosphere that it brings. Can you guys just kind of talk to that in both, like I said, from the broadcaster's perspective and from the player perspective?
Go ahead, Zach, because I get to kind of look down upon it, but you're right in the middle of it. I'd be interested in what you have to say too.
Are you more so talking about the environment in T-Mobile?
Yeah, just like, because I mean, I always kind of talk about, like, when we go on the radio to hype up our games, we talk about how, like, they're junior players, about how when they come out, they feed off of that crowd atmosphere. Like, if there's that buzz, if there's that electricity. And I know that sometimes in the pros, those guys say that they can kind of push that aside, or you kind of get used to the noise. But there's something about Vegas, and it seems the atmosphere and just the game style, that it must be incredible to be a part of it on one side, and it must be very intimidating to be coming at it from the other side.
Yeah, well, I mean, and Dan can attest to it. He's been there right from the get-go. The atmosphere hasn't changed, from year one to now, right? And it's every night our crowd shows up, just as much as we do, and I think we feed off of each other, right? Funny story, I think it was my second game at T-Mobile. You know how we skate out of the helmet? So I stepped onto the ice and I toe picked and I fell. And and no camera got it. Like, no, it was
Lucky.
Never seen. Yeah, it was huge. That would have been
only in our minds, Zach.
Ask Joel Edmondson how that feels. He's been living that one down forever since he bailed in Carolina.
Yeah. Hey, any publicity is good publicity. No, it's just different. You know what I mean? Like when we go on the road, you can tell, you know what I mean? Like it's just different than, I guess the easiest way to say it is nothing is like T-Mobile. And, when we go out there and for the anthem, it's a build up the entire way. And when we're standing in the tunnel in the dressing room, you can hear the building shake, when we're about to walk out, and, that crowd's ready. They're expecting, a good performance, right? And that's what we want to do, is we want to perform for them every night and make sure that their experience is the best that they can walk away from, and they can leave that building and say, wow, you know what I mean? And whether they've been to a game before or not, and whether you're coming for the atmosphere, you're coming for the hockey, you want to leave in a positive mindset, right? So no, I think at the end of the day, we both the crowd and the players feed off of each other, and it makes for a fun time playing hockey.
And the broadcasters do too, to the extent that just the one clip that I hear quite a bit is when the Knights won Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final and Tomáš Nosek scores into an empty net to seal the win. Even the audio recording, you can just barely hear me say score when the puck goes in. And there are a few factors that go into this, guys. First of all, it starts with the organization, the people that Bill Foley put in place, and we know George McPhee and Kelly McCrimmon, but even down to the folks who are in charge of the game presentation, the entertainment, and all of the elements, all of the people that go into that. There was so much planning, months and months going into the first game in Golden Knights history, and as we know, there was quite the tragedy that occurred just before that first home game. So they had to change everything. And I think that the fans recognized what the organization was doing, the business side, the hockey side, which of course had put a great team together and had won a couple of really exciting games. And the fans finally felt legitimized. Las Vegas had never had a major league team before, even though it has been this center of sports, whether it's for tournaments or boxing events, minor league teams. They've never had their own major league sport, but they have over 2 million people who live here. It's a very large market. And this was a way to legitimize it. And here was a way they could prove it, that Bill Foley was right to bring the team here. And the crowd it's a constant buzz. And the other element that I think that keeps the crowd going, not only because the crowd wants to show its support for the team, you're always going to have those folks coming to visit to support the other team. And it creates almost like a soccer environment. Well, the visiting fans, a couple of thousand of those folks are going to make some noise. Well, the Golden Knights fans are not going to be drowned out. So they bark back, and it's sort of a back and forth. And it seems like every game at T-Mobile Arena, regular season or not, feels like a playoff game at many other arenas. There's just a constant buzz. And some markets are more discerning. Gary Lawless, my broadcast partner, will say, like in Montreal, and he was a Canadiens fan growing up, you've got 20,000 coaches in the building. They'll applaud if you do well, but if you don't do well, they're not buzzing. At T-Mobile Arena, there's this constant buzz. And I think the other really neat thing, and I hope that many of your listeners have the opportunity to come see T-Mobile Arena in person, even if you're not rooting for the Golden Knights, because after games, the visiting fans mingle with the Golden Knights fans. And I would say 99% of those interactions are very positive. Hey, thanks for coming to Vegas. We hope you had a good time. Come back soon. And then those visiting fans were like, well, yeah, thanks. We hope you do well. Like, we're going to root for our team. But, you know, if we're not playing you guys, we're rooting for the Golden Knights. Go get them. Like, I just love that. There's just a real passion for the sport. And I'll sum it up by saying this. Max Pacioretty, of course, former captain of the Canadiens, was not here for the first season, but when he was acquired going into season 2, at his press conference, he said the people in Las Vegas first fell in love with the Golden Knights. Then they fell in love with hockey. It was the players, the organization that really won over the community. And then it's like, wow, hockey is really, really an awesome sport. The Golden Knights happen to play this incredible brand of high-paced hockey, so much skill. And, you know, it's just a terrific team. And I think that people just love it even more because it's this great mix of great people, Zach included, of course, and just a terrific community for the sport.
I think I've gotten in trouble for this a couple of times because, you know, where we are in Brandon, we're 200 kilometers up the road from Winnipeg, Jets country. And, you know, when they came back, and I mean, I'm guilty of it. I mean, my first word as a child was Timu because of the original Jets with Timu. And that's not a lie. My mom was here this weekend, and I've got his jersey hanging in my display case. It's not up behind me, but it's in one just down the hall, much to the chagrin of my wife and her decorating skills. But, you know, the Jets fans are a big part of this. But for whatever reason, whether it be the same type of, you know, people that were on the fence about having a team once the Jets left, and then Vegas comes back and the amazing story and the players and the connections to Brandon, I argue every day that Brandon is slowly becoming a Vegas Golden Knights city, me included. I've got, you know, I'm a fan of the Golden Knights. Obviously, I'm a fan of Zach, but with all the connections, you know, between Brandon and Ryan Reeves is one of my favorite Wheat Kings growing up. I've got, you know, a Vegas jersey hanging up in this room too. But you know, Brandon seems to have jumped on the same Vegas bandwagon, and maybe it's because travel's easy to get there from Brandon. A lot of people go there on weekends, but that leads me to this question for you, Zach. I know you'd gone to LA Kings development camp prior to signing with Vegas. Now, your family has a long history with the Wheat Kings, and we'll touch on that a little later, but what was the major factor in, say, you know, I don't know if they offered you a contract or not, but choosing Vegas over, say, LA or any other options you may have had?
Yeah, so that process was a journey, and right after we had lost our college season, I think we lost out in the second round to Michigan Tech. I think it was 2 days later, my agent is from Brainerd, Minnesota, so I drove down there. It's about 2 hours south of Bemidji, just kind of halfway to Minneapolis and St. Paul. And I spent the week with him, and we went into his hockey camp site that's in Brainerd, and it's known as Minnesota Hockey Camps, and it's very, you know, very famous. It's a large campus, you know, for a lot of kids to come to and train there. And I spent the week with him. We were on the phone with, you know, multiple teams, GMs, and you know, different groups, and just kind of narrowing down our list, and just kind of hearing what teams had to say, right? And, you know, what they thought I could provide for their team at some point, you know, obviously not in the near future, but in the long run. So no, and then we kept narrowing it down and further. And I'd kept FaceTiming my parents, this is kind of what's happening. And, this team's out, this team's in sort of deal. And then we kind of, we narrowed it down to, 4 options or however many options. And I went with Vegas because they outlined a plan for me that I knew I could accomplish. They lined out that I could go through this process and have a chance at playing in the National Hockey League. It wasn't going to happen overnight. And nothing in my life ever happened overnight. Playing junior hockey didn't happen overnight. Playing college hockey didn't happen overnight. And playing in the American Hockey League didn't happen overnight. Those things take time. And one of the big things that I took from my current D coach right now, Ryan McGill, he told me, he said, look, you can't get to step 4 without going through 1. You can't just jump through. You know what I mean? You have to go 1, 2, 3, 4. And that really resonated with me. And that I went back to the American League. So that was after I signed my first year. So at the end of the year with the team. And then I went to the American League the next season out of camp. And that's kind of that's what I left with. And I said, or that's what resonated with me again, is that you have to go through the certain steps in order to, become a full-time NHLer, because that stuff takes time. Yeah, it happens quick for some players. Not a lot of guys, but it does happen. But, for guys like me who don't develop that quick, or, take time, and especially for defensemen too, that's a tough position to learn. And especially, come in and play at the National Hockey League level, you have to learn a lot of things and kind of learn how to play and defend and do certain things, right? And then furthermore, learn how to be a pro. So that's what I took with me, and I went down there, and I think I worked harder that year than I ever have. And I still am. I pride myself on being motivated. I pride myself on doing the right things every day, whether it's at the rink or away from the rink, with family, with friends. I try to do the right thing at all times. And that's kind of what has helped me through this whole process. And so when I go back to it, why did I pick Vegas was I was comfortable with the conversations we had. They outlined a plan for me that I had faith in, that I could go in, I could do my work, and I could get through that process and give myself the best chance at playing in the National Hockey League. And they told me what I could do for their team, and I believed it. I still believe it. And I just want to come in after all those years of developing and just contribute on a nightly basis if I'm given that opportunity, right? So no, I mean, the whole process is, they can lay out a plan for you, but it's up to you. You know what I mean? They can tell you, hey, look, you're going to have to go through this and this and this, but that doesn't happen if you're not willing to work and pay attention to detail, be coachable, and go to the American League and make sure that you look after, first of all, your teammates, and, help the team succeed. And, that AHL run that we had last year, we can get into later, but, you go there, you help your teammates, you be a good teammate, you learn how to be a pro. And then all those individual successes will, take care of themselves at some point.
I got to say, Dan, I mean, maybe it's because I'm kind of a closet Vegas fan. I mean, I try not to, root too much.
A closet Vegas fan? Come on.
Okay.
You're just talking about having multiple jerseys and logos throughout the house.
I'm a bit of a fan.
He's the one right behind Zach's dad. I think Crowe's leading the bandwagon in Westman, so...
He doesn't have a Whitecloud jersey.
I don't have a Whitecloud jersey yet, though. No, now that you've signed that new contract and I know you're going to be there, maybe I can go to Source for Sports and put it on. But, following the team and the social media and stuff, they're one of the teams I follow the most closely. And Dan, obviously you and your broadcast team, including former Weeking broadcaster Darren Millard, Nipawa guy, and Shane Knighty, Gary Lawless, a guy who fans in Brandon are familiar with reading his stuff, and then of course, Stormy and everybody else, Dave and the whole crew. You guys seem to have like this kind of full house type connection where you're not really related, but you guys all just get along so well, and you're doing all these things, comparative to most teams you follow. The broadcast crew, whether it be TV, radio, writing, print, whatever, you guys all just seem to just click. Like it's a family almost. Is that an accurate statement?
I think that's right. That's very kind of you. I appreciate that.
You can be John Stamos if you want.
The full house, that's fantastic. I'm going to have to tell that to somebody high up with the Golden Knights, because that's a great description. I like it. And I think that part of it is the organization made a conscious decision to make all of the talent Golden Knights employees. Whereas in a number of markets, you might have, for instance, in Boston, where Dave Gosher came from, Dave worked for the radio station. He didn't work for the Bruins.
Right.
He worked for the Sports Hub. Shane 90, when he was covering, the Jets, he didn't work directly for the Winnipeg Jets. He worked for TSN. Gary Lawless worked for TSN. So
Right.
in junior hockey or in minor leagues, it's more common for a broadcaster to work for the team. But usually, you're a broadcast department of one. I was the only broadcaster when I was in Syracuse, the only broadcaster when I was in Trenton. But the Golden Knights have created this staff, and you listed everybody. I think we have 7 or 8 people who all are employed by the team. So while I might be on the radio for the games, I might also be doing a podcast with Dave and Shane, or we might be doing a video report in the studio with Mike McKenna and Darren Millard. And it just fosters this support for each other, which I appreciate that you recognize that, because the whole idea is we want people to watch and listen and read. And if people get the sense that we're having a good time doing it, which we are, that they might have a good time following along.
Right.
And that's really what this is all about. There is, of course, the professionalism, the journalistic quality that goes into it, but we are trying to enjoy this sport. I do this because I love it. I said to our Spanish play-by-play announcer, whose name is Jesus Lopez, who had done some soccer, and he's from Mexico and didn't have too much exposure to hockey. And I was giving him some advice when we first met a few years ago, and I could see I was being a little too technical. Oh no, I could see in his eyes he was not quite ready for this. I said, Jesus, don't worry. It all comes down to one thing. So thank God. I said, can they hear the smile in your voice? And if anybody is listening to Jesus Lopez, is goal. He has this whole description, and I don't speak Spanish, but he has this description of guys battling in the corner for the puck that translates roughly to something like they're making salsa in the corner. And it's just, you can hear in his descriptions and in his delivery how much he loves doing what he does. And I appreciate you recognizing that, Brandon, because we love what we do. And for the most part, we enjoy working with each other. And the organization has done a great job of putting us in a position to succeed. And Zach can tell you, I get to chat with, coaches and players whenever it's convenient for me and for them. And, I could still remember when Zach showed up in Buffalo shortly after having signed his first contract. He wasn't going to be in the lineup that day, but I wanted to get him on the radio. So we talked with the right folks, and Zach came into the booth, and we arranged for an interview later on. But while he was in the booth, Zach asked me for paper and pencil because he wanted to take notes on the game. And Zach, if I'm not mistaken, you told me not too long ago you still have those notes. Is that right?
Yeah, they're in my suitcase in my bedroom.
There you go. So I love that, and I it's so important for me as a broadcaster to tell stories. That's helps me. I want to know the stories because it helps me get to know the athletes, the coaches, and then to share that with the listener, because the listener wants to know who are those guys, and that's very important to me. And just the number of stories that I've amassed that maybe I should write down or something, but from the minor leagues in Trenton, and then in the American League in Syracuse, and of course with the Vegas Golden Knights. And even last year, Zach mentioned that the run to the Calder Cup final last year, the Golden Knights, as you may recall, were knocked out earlier than planned. So we actually went down to San Diego, some of us. We broadcast Western Conference final game, whatever it was, against San Diego. And I happen to know a few of the guys on that team personally. Ty McGinn, for instance, he and I were in Syracuse together. And so it was just neat to kind of reconnect with guys from that level in the American League, and just the stories that you share. And I'm sure you guys can think of stories from, just this past season of hockey, or maybe a story from 5 years ago, or a bus ride, or, a dinner, or whatever it is. We just got so many stories, and that's what makes what we do all the more special. And
like Crowe was saying, you guys not only have the great staff for it, but when it comes to that new video set, I know you do a lot of radio work, but when you get to do any kind of that video set, that's top-notch national broadcast kind of stuff coming out of a Vegas Golden Knights. So I think that team might set some precedents as well for other teams to follow suit.
Yeah, and it's vision for the organization. You've got people who see the direction of and the tendencies, the projections of what sports media will be, and investing in it. And I mentioned earlier the game presentation at T-Mobile Arena. A lot of the same people who are involved in making that experience so incredible are also involved behind the scenes with the Golden Knights organization, helping to put together some of that video product. There is a great investment. I mean, you walk into the Golden Knights facilities, it looks like you're walking into the studios of TSN or ESPN or a major network that's covering sports. They've got these edit bays and huge screens. It looks like they could fly the Starship Enterprise out of some of these offices. But that's the kind of investment that Bill Foley has made in this organization. He wasn't going to just do it, as a hobby or, just kind of, this would be a fun toy to play with a pro sports team. He's done everything the right way, put people in the right places. And those people, when asked, hey, what's the right way to do something, go for it. And it's just neat to see, we have a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds, but that diversity, I think, has made us strong as an organization. So people will throw out an idea and then rather than saying, oh, no, that could be hard, the mentality is more like, hey, let's give it a shot. Let's see if that works. And they go out and do it.
I'm just glad that when we were trying to fill content that Chris didn't say, hey, Crowe, we need you to do a Brandon Wheat King daily fitness update like Shane 90.
Shane is qualified for that. Some of us broadcasters are not.
I sent that email to a few players. I thought I would leave you off that chain.
Thank God. You talked about diversity, but one common denominator in Vegas, obviously right from the general manager and then Von Karpen and Bobby Lowe's in the scouting department to the first signing of Reed Duke to Mark Stone to Ryan Reeves to, of course, Zach's connection. Now, I'm not sure if you knew this, Dan, but growing up, Zach, his house was full of Brandon Wheat Kings from time to time as his mom, who is... I don't even know if there's.
I would like us to try and go through the list, Zach. Yeah, how many Wheat Kings did you guys bill it while you were growing up?
I think we started when I was 3 or 4. There were a couple of years where my parents took breaks just because I was starting to get into higher level hockey and stuff like that. And then my mom got bored, and then we picked up another one, and I think we went through. I have to ask my mom for sure. I want to say no less than 7 or 8.
Now, without offending and missing anybody, what are some names that kind of pop up that you remember having in the house growing up then that were a big influence on you?
It wasn't so much, guys that lived with us. It was guys that came through the organization. You know what I mean? Like the two off the top of my head, Mike Furland and Jordan Tutu. Those are two guys that I resonate with closely. And I've trained with Toots. I train with Mike every summer, and obviously them being Aboriginal from Canada, those two guys kind of really, set the way for a lot of us younger Aboriginal kids just to kind of look up to and realize that, obviously 2 different paths. Mike has a different path than Jordan, and, Jordan came from, up north in Nunavut, and, Fur came from, I'd say like mid Manitoba, northern Manitoba, I guess you can say. And then I myself growing up in Brandon, and, they're two guys that I can look up to and realize, you can do it, you know what I mean? And then you can go through certain things, and obviously not their paths, but, I have my own path, and that, eventually I'll work through it and get through it. And if I want to play in the NHL, you just got to work hard at it and, keep on that good road, as a lot of people like to say. So.
I remember doing, Zach, the year in Verdun where you and I worked together, I remember doing the year-end awards and emailing the parents and saying, do you have any pictures of, your sons in a younger day? And your mom sent a couple. And my favorite one, and I think you might remember this, it's Jordan Tutu in the Wheat King dressing room before it was renovated to be all nice. And it must have been a skate with the Wheat Kings or something. And you're sitting on his shoulders like a piggyback. You must have been like maybe 7 or 8 years old. And you were just sitting there and you had this big smile on your face. Like, this is my guy and I'm a big fan. And you just were on cloud 9 in that picture. And for whatever reason, I've always thought that it's too bad that you guys couldn't have overlapped at your pro career. Obviously, he's a little bit older than you, but your hat, we got to touch on that. Dan mentioned it earlier. Ryan Reeves, he stood me up for this show tonight. I wanted him on here with you too, but I sent him a message on Twitter from the team account, the Brandon Wheat Kings account. And I said, hey, Ryan, I know that you're probably busy, which is, we all know that's a lie. Nobody's doing anything right now. And he iced me. He never replied. and then you come on wearing a 7-5 Brewing hat, which is his company. That's some free advertising that I'm not okay with right now. We got to get him on.
Apparently he's getting it anyhow. Yeah, I'm sure he's got an important marketing meeting, Brandon. I mean, he's got to design more hats like that or come up with some new flavors. I'm a fan, and I'm not saying that because I know Ryan. I actually really enjoy some of what he's been putting out there.
Yeah, maybe Zach, you can send him a message, guilt him a little bit, and maybe get a couple of hats or a couple of cases of 7-5 Brewing smuggled up over the border here.
I don't know. I mean, you can take it up with yourself. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, no. I grew up watching Ryan Reeves beating guys up while I was playing mini sticks along the glass. That's not where I want to take that by any means.
Yeah, but you'll gladly stay on the other side of the glass for that one, hey?
100%.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, it's still one of the great moments in Golden Knights history for Ryan Reeves to score the conference clinching goal against the Winnipeg Jets in Winnipeg. You know, he was just getting into the lineup. He had just played his first Golden Knights playoff games several days earlier against the Sharks because Will Carrier got hurt. But for him to, just incredible that the Golden Knights did what they did in that first season. And Ryan was still trying to find his place, his identity on a new team at that point. And then he scores one of the biggest goals in franchise history, and it's in his hometown. I mean, he's done a lot of great things for the Knights in the couple of years since then, but how that moment for him doesn't go down as one of his greatest ever, that is just like, you can't make it up, right? If you were to send that script to Hollywood, they'd turn you away, and Ryan made it happen.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of good things for the organization, that I was going to bring it up earlier, but going back to, Dan and his broadcasting team and everyone that kind of, puts in work to make those shows happen. And obviously guys like Dan who, bring the excitement and energy to people listening through the radio or watching on TV. That's one of the biggest things. And that's one of the questions, they're the feeling that I got from my interview with George and Kelly is that, you can be a good employee, you can be a good hockey player. But if you're not a good person, then you're not helping much. You know what I mean? So I think that's one of the biggest, and Dan, you can probably attest to it, is, everyone in this organization is a very good person, and, they're a joy to be around. They're always happy, and, they're always, complimenting each other, whether it's in the work environment or for us on the ice in practice, in the video room, whatever it is. You got good people everywhere. And that's one of the vibes that I got from, our meetings is that, you can be a great hockey player, but if you're not a good person, then, this isn't the place, you know what I mean? So, that's what I pride myself on is, if I can be a good person first, a good person in the community here in Vegas, and that was the same way in Chicago is, if I can treat people off the ice away from the team, and obviously my teammates, my coaches, the scouts, the general manager, the ownership, then I can go and play hockey freely. And, if you're not being a good person, then you're not helping much.
Yeah. You're so right, Zach. And it's just, you pinch yourself sometimes to think that you're part of this really neat group of people, but it does go back to just being kind and being humble. Humility will take you a long way in this business. And, I think back to the different people that you come across, and, you can be extremely competitive. You can be extremely ambitious, but you can also be kind. Whether it's, rubbing shoulders with Kelly McCrimmon or Marc-Andre Fleury or Kenny, who operates the elevator at T-Mobile Arena. You could be kind to all these people. It doesn't matter what your role is with the organization. That's just part of being a good person. And I think, Zach, it was interesting hearing you guys talk about, billet families. And, for me, they don't call it billet families in the Cape Cod Baseball League. They just call them host families. But I think of the host family that I lived with when I was broadcasting baseball there in Cape Cod during my college years, and I am still part of the family. I mean, that's a relationship that wasn't just for a couple of summers. Those are things that last a lifetime. And I still go back and coach some student broadcasters there in the off season for hockey. And I think it just reminds you of your roots. And boy, if you could talk to your, I'm 35 now, but if you could talk to your, 25-year-old self or your 15-year-old self and think, boy, this is what you're going to get to do. to remember where you've come from, the people, you talked about this earlier, Zach, the people who helped get you there that went out of their way, whether it's family members or billet family, the mentors, coaches, teammates, colleagues, whoever it might be. We hear that phrase, a self-made man or a self-made woman. I'm not sure that there's ever really such a thing. We're all a product of the people who've helped us. And sometimes you learn things from people who were not good to you. And you learn, hey, I don't want to be thought of in that way. So we're all a product of our experiences, but I think that so much of that, being a kind person and remembering your roots, I think that, you talk about characters, Zach, I think that stuff goes a long way.
And to go back to the host family, I mean, Crozy knows, my billet family in Verdun where I played junior, and
great people.
Yeah. And I talk to her like I talk to my own mom. You know what I mean? I go to her with problems. I go to the both of them, and my billet dad, I still talk to him like he's my father. And then funny enough, I got to know, and I think Crow, the Scarfs, don't you?
Yep. Yeah. Chad and what's his wife's
Chad
name?
Chad and Rita.
Rita.
Yeah. So Chad and Rita, the Scarfs, as they're well known for, own a cattle ranch just southeast of Verdun. And they gave me my first ever job in junior hockey. And, we didn't play too much during the league. Like, we play the odd Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, but usually one game a week, and then on weekends. And so I'd work during the week. I'd get up, 7 o'clock, go skate, get out of there by 11, 12 o'clock, go eat lunch, then go out to work for the afternoon. And that's a family that I, like my billet families, I call them mom and dad. They're like my parents. And I didn't spend as much time with them as I did with my original billet family, but they're people that I call family. And Rita and Chatter, I try to call them at least once a week and just keep up. And they have 2 kids, Kate and Danica, and both heavily involved in sports. And it's 2 kids and a family that I love very much, and spent a lot of time out there, stayed out there after work, and helped with homework and things like that, and just got to know them really well. And again, with your host families, like, you're a part of the family.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen like that all the time.
There's some scary stories, but there's more good stories than there are bad ones.
Yeah. So, I mean, the relationships I built and created, and just kind of, still have in Verdun, makes me, cherish my time there, because without those 2 families, and obviously my parents and everyone else that, went into helping me get, through those levels, I wouldn't be here without them. And, I still, when I go out in the summer, when I go home in the summer, I always go out and I try to, work on the farm a few times, and go out and hang out with the kids, and just sit down and have a drink or whatever, and just hang out and kind of reminisce about the days in Verdun, and me helping out with homework. And it brings back good memories, because I only had 1 family going into that, and then I came out with 2. I came out with 3 families, and they're families that I love very much, and ones that I attribute a lot of my success to, because they helped me. I think without that job, and that's something I want to do after hockey too, is kind of have my own cattle ranch at some point. And that all stems from, Chad and Rita kind of putting me to work out there, and kind of teaching me, the farm life, and how, hard those people work. Cause I mean, Chad gets up on Christmas Day and he goes out and feeds the cows, and he doesn't take a day off, and he has a 9-to-5 job as well, Monday through Friday. And on top of that, the ranch. So they taught me a lot about hard work, and kind of being a big brother to Kate and Danica. And again, I grew up without siblings, so it was kind of cool to have be a part of that family, and be able to hang out there whenever I wanted. And again, there's 2 families that helped me get through a lot in my days in Bird.
Well, Zach, outside this window right here, I've got a bit of room that needs some fencing. I got some cows coming over here June 1st. So if you can be on a flight, Chad and Rita don't live far down the road, but just come finish the fencing here, and there's a few bales that need to be moved, and then you can go help them.
Chad put me through some fencing, actually, one, I think it was 2 summers ago when I came back from college, and he sent me out to do one of their pasture fields. and there was this like little swampy part, and he said, "Yeah, just ride fence and see whatever needs to be fixing." Of course, the one that needed to be fixed was right through a beehive, and it was right through the bush, right in the swamp. I got it done
Every
but
time. Every
I
time.
came out on the bad end of that one, but it kind of made for a funny story. And Chad was like, "Man, you didn't have to do that. You know, I wouldn't have done it." And I was like, "Well, you asked me, so I did it." You know, so they.
Well, I've
But
got
I
the fence
do
poster
charge
leaning
by
up
the yard,
against the
though.
shed, so. No,
I do charge by the yard, though.
The hammer's in the shed, the fence poster leaning up against the back. So just whenever you get a chance.
I'll drop by whenever, yeah.
So while Crowe tries to get free labor out of Zach there, Dan, I want to ask you a question. So we heard about like Zach's history with the Wheat Kings. How about you? I mean, you're on the East Coast. Have you heard about the Wheat Kings? Like, I mean, obviously you have before going, I would assume, to Vegas, but what was your first exposure? What do you remember of the team? Is there a famous player that you remember hearing about, or what was your first recollection?
Ooh, that's interesting. I think that growing up in New Jersey, it's such a pro sports neck of the woods. You think you got 3 NHL teams: Devils, Rangers, Islanders. You got 2 NBA teams: the Nets and the Knicks, Yankees and Mets, the Jets and the Giants. So minor league sports, college sports, and certainly junior level sports hardly enters the picture when you're a kid. But then as you kind of get into, the higher levels, yourself as a teenager in high school, and to, my high school hockey team, we had some pretty good players. I didn't play on the team. I broadcast the games, but you were aware of, the talented players who were looking at, different junior leagues. Now, nobody was going to the WHL from New Jersey, but then the other guys that were thinking about going the collegiate route. So I knew guys who played college hockey. And then once, I was in college, I broadcast junior games for a team called the Syracuse Stars. And that was when I became more aware of not only the importance of junior hockey, but kind of the 3 main junior leagues in the WHL, the OHL, the Quebec Major Junior League, and the Syracuse Stars were in the Empire League. They were not one of the top tier teams even in the United States, but like the Sestitos had played for the Syracuse Stars and some other guys that did eventually move up. So I was aware of that history. And then when you kind of get a feel for, okay, here are some names that I know and here's their path, then you become more familiar with the different levels of junior hockey. So I would say that I don't know that I could tell you the first Brandon Wheat King I was keenly aware of, or even which one I first met. But I'm sure it was around that point in time where I would have come to know, okay, this guy played for the London Knights. This guy played for the Brandon Wheat Kings. And, we're talking probably 2004, 2005. So if you had some names, to rattle off from maybe 20 years ago.
Ray Ferraro.
Well, there you go. Okay, yeah.
Ray Ferraro scored 100 and what was it? We talked about this last week.
108 goals. How can you possibly forget that number now after a conversation?
Yeah.
Because Darren Dreger always jokes that it was 109 or 170. It's never serious with those two guys.
Yeah. So that's and then when you start going into the professional ranks and in the ECHL with the Trenton Devils. Remember, this is a Lou Lamoriello organization, so you had a number of guys who had gone the college route. We had Boston College guys, Providence College, Brown, and so on. But there was that group, the college guys, but then there were, the junior guys. And then within that, we're okay, here are the guys who are the Quebec guys, right? The Francophiles. And then, here are the guys from the West. And so you kind of got a better understanding of that, because now all of a sudden it wasn't just a name on a list. These were guys who actually played in those junior leagues, and then the college guys and the junior guys would have at it. That was fun. And most of the players in the ECHL were not going to be moving up to the NHL. I think Pierre-Luc Letourneau LeBlanc was the one guy who made it from the Trenton Devils up to the New Jersey Devils for any significant period of time. But so my years kind of blur together, but I will tell you for sure, upon arriving in Las Vegas, it was very much Brandon South with the number of Wheat King connections here. And you mentioned some of the names earlier, but of course, Kelly McCrimmon is the big name, when it comes to the front office. But you just go down the list of, maybe this guy was there, or this guy played there, or he coached there, or it's just amazing to see. And I can remember kind of, in one conversation, early on. So I'm coming from the Devils, origins, and Vince Williams was a Golden Knights scout, still is, and he was an assistant coach in Trenton when I was there. David Conti, longtime Devils employee, and has since joined Lou Lamoriello with the Islanders. But Mr. Conti, Mr. Williams, and Mr. Duva were sitting there talking about the old Devils days, and then looking around and seeing all these Brandon Wheat Kings. so like, you kind of, of course we were all working together, but you always think about your roots and where you've come from, as we talked about earlier. And so you're intrigued by, wow, that's got to be something pretty special that they've built there in Brandon. And I know a lot of stories, but I have yet to visit Brandon, Manitoba. So I'll have to put that destination on my list for some time in the future.
Well, I think I would be probably pretty accurate in saying that Brandon, Manitoba is probably the only city in Manitoba that has a 9-foot inflatable Chance the Mascot Christmas decoration, because Dana,
I don't even know if they have those in Vegas.
The office executive with the Wheat Kings had to buy one from the armory or the store in Vegas and set it up. It was too cold to set up outside, so she had it set up in her living room, a 9-foot glow-in-the-dark Christmas decoration.
Wow. The amount of unique Vegas items around the Wheat King office is getting out of control with those girls.
Can we acknowledge the fact that Crowe just said one of the biggest cities when there's only 2 cities in Manitoba?
Yeah, you're right, Zach. Winnipeg and
You're throwing shade at Portage and Dauphin now? They don't count?
Yeah. You're knocking Portage and Dauphin. As we get close to wrapping this up, obviously the big question that we have to ask you guys, and it's kind of different for both of you. I know, Dan, you've stayed busy doing podcasts, interviews, videos, and content for Vegas, and Zach's been swinging the golf club and not really been able to get on the ice. If I were to ask you, Zach, I know you're going to give me a political answer, but do you want the season to continue right now, or has it gone too far to the point where it's going to take you some time to get back into it? What are your thoughts on finishing the season instead of maybe just looking ahead to next year? What are your thoughts on this whole pandemic thing?
Well, when you ask what I want, I just want to play hockey. I want to play for the fans here in Vegas, you know what I mean? And obviously, whether there is fans or there isn't, it's all like everyone has their own opinion, right? And it's all speculation until, a certain plan comes out or whatever is kind of brought up about it. But yeah, I want to play hockey, and I want to play for our fans, and I want to do well for our fans. We want to do well for our fans. And as for getting back into it, I think you guys just, you got to look after your body. You got to try and find different creative ways to stay in shape, and just be ready for all scenarios. I mean, that's all you can kind of do right now.
Dan, what are your thoughts?
I follow up with that, and the thing that just kind of blows my mind is how, with all the sports trying to get back into game shape, how hockey players have this baseball player, et cetera, you can get in the gym and relatively approximate what you need to do to get ready for a season. But a hockey player simply can't do that without being on the ice, no matter what you do in a gym. I would like to get out there. I mean, I'd like to get on the ice myself. That'll burn some calories from all the ice cream. But I am optimistic as well, and I can understand some players who are on teams that are long since out of the playoff picture that don't see the value in getting ramped up again, play a handful of games, and not really have a shot at going very far. Of course, the Golden Knights, let's be honest, the Golden Knights are in first place. Golden Knights are in very good position to make a long playoff run, especially with the time that we've had since the last game. The guys who might have been out with injuries, like Max Pacioretty and Mark Stone and Alex Tuch. Pete DeBoer told us a couple of weeks ago, those guys are all 100% now. And that would be the case with other teams too, but you see where I'm going. So, you read the latest, and Gary Bettman, I think, has been very good at talking about the integrity of awarding a Stanley Cup and not wanting to turn it into a gimmick. They want to do this the right way while also not impacting next season. They want to play a full 82 games next year. How far can they push back this season? Then, of course, you've got the economic concerns, the health concerns, and, people of higher pay grade are in charge of those things, not me. But speaking as a journalist, a broadcaster, and a hockey fan, I think that what Vegas did for the people of this community a few years ago when they launched the franchise, and then how they helped the franchise come together in the face of the October 1 shooting, it is such a powerful, emotional, bonding thing to have a sports team to rally a community. And that's the case in Vegas and many other places around North America. So I know that the competitiveness of the athlete, like, of course, Zach said a moment ago, wants to get out there and play hockey and win hockey games and go far in the playoffs. And sports fans of all stripes just want to see live games again. As much as I enjoy going into the archives and watching documentaries, I want new sports to watch. I want new stories to tell. So if it's July or whatever the format is, I'm optimistic that they will find a way to get going again. And for the Golden Knights to be part of it, I'm even more excited. I might feel differently if they were, a last place team, of course.
Right.
But they're not. So I don't have to worry about that. I'm looking forward to a terrific, talented Golden Knights team going out there, and the people will watch and will listen, even if they can't be in the building. Only 18,000 people would fit in T-Mobile Arena for a game, but there are over 2.3 million people who live in Las Vegas, not to mention all of those fans in Brandon and around North America who would be tuned in as well.
I think another thing I think everyone has to look at is it's the same scenario for everyone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not as if, some guys get ice and the other guys don't. Obviously, you have your injured reserve players that, do get to rehab and things like that. But, it's the same situation for a lot of teams. And so, I mean, coming back is going to be different for everyone. And everyone's going to have to work their way back in. And that's assuming the season does come back, or if it doesn't, then what have you. But at the end of the day, it's the same situation for a lot of guys. You got to, find different ways and be creative and just try and keep your mind and your body right, and keep it sharp, and just kind of be ready for all scenarios.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, Chris, you got anything else?
Number one Netflix binge that you guys have been going to?
Oh, yeah. Great question. Number one Netflix binge.
Danny, get some time?
Go ahead, Zach. I've got a few in mind, but go ahead.
Okay. Well, it's not Netflix. I watched Game of Thrones.
Oh.
I wasn't expecting
this
that.
Was
that's a good answer.
So I started this at the start of quarantine. So when was that? How long have we been in here for? 2 months?
Middle of March,
more than
wasn't
2
it?
months.
Yeah, it was
March 11th. So
yeah, but almost 2 months. I went through Game of Thrones in a little under 2 weeks.
Oh,
wow.
Well, yeah. Did you sleep and eat during this period of time as well?
Well, I took a nap on the couch for about 20 minutes and then kept watching. But
skip the dishes right to that window beside him. They just drove by and dropped off his dinner right through that open window.
Yeah, put it through the doggy door so I can just grab it.
That's great. I tell you that I mentioned earlier documentaries, and anything that Ken Burns puts out is just terrific. So I've watched a number of those, and some are 1 part or 2 parts, and some are 10 parts. And obviously you had the Last Dance with Michael Jordan. Enjoyed watching that. But just the Ken Burns 10-part piece on baseball. I actually just recently got into the Ken Burns documentary, and I think it's also 10 parts about the Vietnam War. There's the country music documentary that he did. Fantastic. The one about the Roosevelts. I could go on and on listing all of Ken Burns' documentaries. I have watched the Civil War documentary many times, voiced by David McCullough, who happens to be my favorite author. But Ken Burns is good. But, the other thing is, like, you kind of can get tired of some of this serial type television that they put out now, where 24, the TV show is 1 hour and then 1 hour, and you can't really get into it in the middle. You've got to watch the whole thing. So once in a while, I'll enjoy go back and, pick up a show from 20, 30 years ago where it was just one neat, happy episode and that's it. And so I, what show I watched a few episodes of last week was Murder, She Wrote. Murder, She Wrote, right? Angela Lansbury, which is it's great. It's this murder mystery in this nice little village of Cabot Cove, Maine, and then people get killed, and Angela Lansbury solves the murder. It's fantastic. So that's good. And then I also have to say that they're, to me, two of the best TV series ever: The Sopranos and The West Wing. And you can dive into those in the middle, at the end, or at the start, and just great shows. So I've kind of mixed it around as to not get too consumed by one particular program.
I've been getting the gears because I posted on Twitter the other day that my wife and I are on season 6 now of Roseanne, which to me, I was a little bit out of that age range. Like, I remember my parents watching it, but I don't really ever remember watching it. And I have never laughed out loud at a TV show like I have Roseanne. But everybody on Twitter told me I was nuts and that it's not actually a good show. But I think they're wrong. I think it's a top 10 sitcom by far.
Yeah, I mean, it's not Cheers, but it's still really good.
Fantastic.
Falko, what about you?
Yeah, what's yours, Chris?
You know what? I still gotta get stuck on The Office. It's kind of hard to get past it. Brooklyn Nine-Nine is always a really good one too, as of late. I signed up for Amazon Prime a while ago to take advantage of the Amazon deals, and then I forgot to unsubscribe. So then I thought, well, I might as well see what's on the video service. So I got hooked. I've never seen an episode of Hell's Kitchen, and there's 17 seasons. So Zach, this might put Game of Thrones to shame. I've gone through all 17 seasons since this quarantine has begun. But it's been like background noise, right? Like I just kind of put it on, and it's kind of there throughout the day. But yeah, Hell's Kitchen, a lot of Gordon Ramsay. So a lot of cooking then as well I've been doing to help pass the time.
Well, here, I've got a deal then. Chris and I will come to Vegas. The 4 of us will go eat at Chef Ramsay's restaurant. And then when you guys get some free time, you guys come to Brandon. We'll take you to Joe Beaver's, and you guys can have a nice big poutine, Dan. Zach knows what I'm talking about.
We just had that last night, and actually in this house. We had Joe Beaver's poutine in this house. It's a Brandon staple.
Yeah.
And
one of my
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, Zach, a heads up. According to Aaron, who's on Wikipedia, Manitoba has 10 cities. So we shouldn't go slagging that we've only got 2. Apparently, we actually have 10. So we missed a whole bunch. But anyway.
Well, you didn't miss any. I was the one from Manitoba.
I was going to say that when you look at the poutine situation, so my wife's friend is Brooks Broughton, who you may know, Dan. He's a social media guy for the Nashville Predators, and he came up for a visit last summer, and we took him to Joe Beaver's, and we told him to order the famous poutine, and he's an American from Pittsburgh. And when it sat down on the plate in front of him, it's a brick, like a log of French fries and gravy and whatever else, and buffalo chicken wings on it. It was
don't they just dump it out of the fryer?
Like it's the same shape as the basket from
the
frying machine.
It comes in
the whole idea, guys. It's Joe Beaver, so it's like a beaver dam, right?
It looks like a dam.
So it's like a beaver dam on the plate, and all the fries are not all loose; they're all kind of like cooked together.
He wouldn't touch it until he took a picture and sent it to everyone he knew in Nashville and said, "Look at what I'm about to eat right now." So it was life-changing for him. So we'll make sure we can get you one day. I don't know if he finished it. He's kind of a slight little fella that likes salads and doesn't like carbs, so he was a little offended by how much carbs were on this plate.
Oh, so not like you and I, eh?
No. That thing wouldn't have stood a chance. Fellas, this was awesome. Try and stay safe, and best of luck whenever you get going. Zach, I expect you to reach out to Ryan and try and get us a couple of hats at least for him icing us on Twitter, and let us know how that goes.
Hey, I'm going to let him know, Brandon Crowe, and I'm going to give him your address, and he's got a bone to pick with you.
Please do. No. Please do.
I'll do the play-by-play of the aftermath, okay?
There you go.
All right, guys.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Brandon. This is great.
No, thanks again, guys. We really do appreciate it. We'll talk to you guys again soon, hopefully.
Yeah, thanks for having us on, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, here we go.
Here's the awkward part.
As we say goodbye to everybody.
Oh, there's one. Oh, Zach's still here. He wants to linger.
Bye, Zach.
I'll hang on for a bit.
Just gonna hang on there? We're gonna remove you.
Yeah, I'll hang on. I got nothing else to do.
Huh? Okay, well, I feel bad for Dan now. We just said goodbye to Dan, and now Zach's gonna hang on.
Right. So the plan for next week, Chris, this is usually where we tee it up. Well, maybe at this point, Ryan Reeves will have showed up at my door, and I can convince him to jump on live. Yep. No, the plan is for next week is to reach out to both Travis Sanheim and Ivan Provorov and do a little Philadelphia Flyer look. Obviously, Sanheim didn't play for Brandon, but he's an Elkhorn kid and Western Manitoba kid similar to Zach. And, of course, Provy, one of the best defenseman to roll through the Wheat Kings organization. So just ironing that out this week, and we'll have more details on that as we head into the weekend.
If you're watching this live, if you're one of the viewers, as always, really do appreciate it. But if you're listening on the Traditional Pie podcast means, of course, appreciate that as well. Next episode will be live next Monday at 8 o'clock, and again, available that following Tuesday, beginning at noon at qcountryfm.ca or wherever you get your podcasts. So thanks for tuning on in tonight. Any final words from you guys? Zach, you're here for it. Any final word?
You got to say hi to your mom. Is Donna listening somewhere?
Yeah, probably. Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. From Vegas. Hopefully you figured her out by the end of the hour. If not, then too bad.
Yeah, Donna, if you had trouble with the technical side of things, just send me a text and I'll walk you through it.
Oh, she's going to be so mad at you too.